before the sun even thinks of rising, before the horizon begins to colour, before birds test the first morning notes of the day, ancient Egypt is already awake. Not bustling, not energetic, merely stirring. In this land, life begins long before the world brightens. You would not last a day here, not because of danger or hardship, though both quietly exist, but because of the rhythm, a rhythm so slow, so ancient, so steady, that it demands a fundamental surrender. A willingness to move with the Nile rather than push against it. A willingness to wake at the hour when the air is still cool, when the world smells of wet clay and river reeds, when even time seems hesitant, as if it too has just opened its eyes. Here, at the very edge of the river, a faint mist rises. It hovers above the dark surface like a thin veil pulled from a dream. The Nile is quiet now, deeply quiet, a slow breath of water, waiting. A wooden boat, tied loosely to a stake at the bank, nudges the shoreline. The soft sound is almost nothing, a gentle tap, the faintest knock of wood on earth. But in the stillness before dawn, it feels like a declaration, a tiny reminder. Life is preparing to begin its motions. In the village that rests along this bend of the Nile, the first person to fully wake is not a noble, not a priest, not a warrior. It is a fisherman. A man whose entire existence is tied to the subtle changes of the river, the wind, the flow, the clarity of the water, the migration of fish. He rises not from a bed of feathers or cloth, but from a simple mat woven from reeds. The mat is thin. The floor is hard. But this is enough, and has always been enough. He stretches quietly, careful not to wake the children sleeping near him. There is no candle, no lamp yet. The moon's fading light spills through a small carved opening in the wall. It is just enough illumination for him to find his sandals, shaped from palm fibres, and the fishing net he spent the previous evening repairing. The air is cool, cooler than one might expect from a land known for relentless heat. It is a short, precious window of gentleness before the sun asserts its rule. He steps outside. The village is still a silhouette, a cluster of mud brick structures softened by the darkness. No fires burn, no voices speak. Even the animals sleep deeply. Only a single donkey lifts its head for a moment, sniffing the air before settling again. In the distance, the desert waits. An endless, quiet presence. A reminder of the fragility of life along this narrow strip of green that hugs the river. But here, at this hour, the desert does not threaten. It merely observes. The fisherman walks slowly toward the riverbank, not hurried, not tense. There is no need for haste. The fish are waiting, and they have nowhere to go in the dark. A thin breeze brushes across the reeds. They sway gently, whispering to one another. A language older than any kingdom. Nearby, a woman also awakens. She is elderly, her hair streaked with grey, her back curved slightly from a lifetime of grinding grain, kneading dough, and carrying jars of water. She wakes every morning at this hour, long before anyone else in her household. This is the moment she treasures. The silence, the stillness, the calm. She lights a small clay lamp with practiced motions. The flame flickers, making soft shadows dance across the interior of her home. The walls, simple, unadorned, made from the same earth that surrounds the village, seem to glow. She sits on a reed mat and begins to prepare the emmer wheat for grinding. She moves slowly, not because she is old, but because all things in this hour are meant to be done slowly, deliberately, calmly. The sound she makes, the gentle rasp of wheat being measured into a basket, is so quiet that it blends into the atmosphere itself. Soon, more homes begin to stir. A cough here, a soft yawn there, a baby shifting in its sleep. These are the earliest signs of the living world returning. But no one speaks yet. Not until the sun speaks first. Far across the river, the first hint of colour begins to gather. A faint blue, almost imperceptible. Then a soft wash of pale violet. The fisherman stands at the water's edge and looks toward the horizon. The sky is so vast here, unbroken, endless, a dome of potential light. He breathes deeply. The scent that fills his lungs is thick with the smell of river plants, moist soil, and distant incense drifting from a temple not yet visible. He steps into the boat. The wood creaks gently beneath his weight. He does not push off immediately. He takes a moment to simply sit, letting the river cradle him, letting the morning hold its breath around him. This is ancient Egypt as it truly existed. Not the dramatic golden world of pharaohs and monuments, not the battlefield of chariots or the grandeur of palaces, but this quiet hour, this calm, this unbroken connection between the land and its people. A world of soft beginnings, a world of small rituals, a world where life is measured by the rising of the Nile and the rising of the sun. The fisherman lowers his net into the water. There is no splash, only a slow, smooth descent. The movement feels less like work and more like a continuation of something already happening, an extension of the river's own motion. As he waits, a faint sound emerges from the sky, the beating of wings. A small flock of ibis birds glides overhead, their silhouettes elegant, drifting softly toward a patch of reeds where they will begin their morning search for food. The old woman grinding wheat pauses for a moment to listen. She closes her eyes. The birds' movement, the air shifting around them. It is all part of the familiar rhythm she has known since childhood. Inside another home, a potter wakes. He sits cross-legged beside his small wheel, running his hand along its wooden edge. He will begin work only after the sun rises fully, but he enjoys the feeling of the cool clay beneath his fingers in the early morning. The clay is smoother now, easier to shape, holding the moisture of the night. In a corner of the village, a young boy wakes from a dream. He stretches his arms sleepily and pads barefoot across the cool floor. He watches his mother silently as she mends a piece of linen cloth. She smiles at him, but she does not speak. Words are rare in this hour. They feel too heavy for the fragile morning. He sits beside her, leaning against her shoulder, feeling the softness of the linen, the warmth of her presence. He does not know it yet, but mornings like this, slow, gentle, quiet, are the heartbeat of ancient Egyptian life. Outside, the horizon grows brighter. Gold begins to form over the water. A single stripe of light, thin at first, then widening. The fisherman sees it. The world is waking. He dips his hand into the Nile, feeling the cold water slip between his fingers. This water is not merely water, it is the source of everything. Food, soil, transportation, ritual, survival. It is the beginning and the end of daily life. And now, as the sky brightens further, a soft chorus of sound begins to rise from the village. The grinding of grain, the bleating of goats, the fluttering of birds landing on rooftops, the distant thud of someone chopping wood. The first human voices, still low, still gentle. The sun finally breaks the horizon, and with that, ancient Egypt fully awakes. It is still slow, still calm, still grounded in routine, but its stillness has shifted from the silence of the night to the soft hum of life. This is the moment where you begin to understand why you would not last a day here. Not because it is harsh, but because it is ancient, circular, and unhurried. A life shaped not by clocks or noise or urgency, but by an unbroken, centuries-long rhythm shared by millions of ordinary people. A rhythm that asks you to slow down, to breathe with the land, to listen to the small sounds, to be content with quiet. The fisherman pulls up his net. It is heavy, not full but promising. He smiles. Behind him the village is now alive, and the day has only just begun.
Ancient Egypt does not leap into its mornings. It eases into them, slowly, like a long sigh, like the quiet shifting of sand in the desert wind. The village at the river's edge still holds the last traces of night. Shadows linger in the narrow alleys between mud brick houses. Clay rooftops, still cool from the darkness, reflect the palest blush of dawn. The world is tinted in a muted, gentle gold. The stillness, though, has changed. It is no longer the deep silence of pre-dawn. Now it is a softer hum, a low thrum of life settling into its ancient rhythm. Inside a small home near the center of the village, a young woman ties her hair with a strip of linen. She moves slowly, not out of laziness, but because here nothing is done in haste. Life is lived by the sun, the river, and the seasons, not by clocks. She steps outside and stands quietly in the open air. She breathes it in. The scent of the morning is layered and familiar. The dampness of the river, the earthy smell of clay, the faint sweetness of drying grain, the smoke from a still glowing ember inside a family hearth. She closes her eyes. This is the hour she loves most, when the village is half awake, half dreaming. A dog wanders past her feet, stretching and sniffing, tail swaying with lazy contentment. The dog pauses to look at her. She smiles and scratches the top of its head. It's the same ritual every morning. A few houses away, two sisters emerge carrying large, well-worn water jars. They walk in silence toward the river, bare feet brushing through dust softened by dew. Their bracelets clink softly, not brightly, not sharply, but faintly, like a reminder that sound itself is still waking up. At the riverbank, the fisherman from before dawn is returning. His boat glides across the surface with almost no disturbance, cutting a gentle line through the reflection of the rising sun. The sisters wait patiently for him to dock. No one here pushes ahead. The day is long, and the river will flow with or without hurry. When the fisherman steps onto the bank, he nods to them with an easy, quiet respect. He lifts a small basket from the boat, the morning's catch, glistening faintly in the soft light. He doesn't speak, neither do they. Words, in this hour, feel unnecessary. Everything important is understood without them. In nearly every home, the first true sound of daily labor begins, the steady, rhythmic grinding of grain. It is the sound that defines Egyptian village life. A stone quern sits on the floor of almost every household, a flat slab of stone and a smaller rounded handstone. Women, usually seated on woven mats, lean forward and press the grain beneath the stone with slow, practiced motions. Forward, back, forward, back. The rhythm is almost meditative, soft, consistent, unbroken. A young child, no more than 5, watches his mother grind the wheat. He leans his head against her shoulder, listening to the grain crack beneath the stone. He may not realize it yet, but this sound will follow him throughout his entire life. In another home, an older woman hums while she grinds. The melody is simple, quiet, and ancient. Perhaps a tune her own mother hummed decades ago. Perhaps one whispered by someone long forgotten. In Egypt, traditions do not fade quickly. They linger for generations. They settle into the corners of homes like dust, fine and unspoken, but always present. As the grinding continues, the village animals begin to stir. A rooster calls out, not sharply, but with a slow, drawn-out cry. A pair of goats nudge each other awake, shaking dust from their coats. A cow lowing softly echoes between mud brick walls, deep and warm. She knows her routine. She will be fed, milked, brushed. Everything in her day follows a pattern. She does not need to think, only wait. Inside a small pen, a donkey brays with mild impatience. He has work to do today, and though he is not eager, he is ready. A boy comes to pat his neck, whispering something gentle into his ear. The donkey leans into the touch. Even the insects participate in the morning ritual. Dragonflies skim low over puddles left by yesterday's irrigation. Beetles crawl across the edges of reed mats. A single bee investigates a crack in a clay pot. The world feels small, contained, peaceful. As the sun climbs higher, another scent spreads through the village. Fresh dough being shaped. Bread is the core of life here. More than a food, almost a symbol of survival itself. Women carry baskets of ground grain and water to small dome-shaped clay ovens. Some ovens belong to individual families. Others are shared among neighbors. A young girl kneads dough with steady, gentle pressure. Her hands are small, but her movements are sure. She has helped make bread since she was old enough to stand. Her mother sprinkles crushed seeds into the mixture, adding flavor and texture. Not many families can afford spices, but sesame and coriander grow easily nearby. When the dough is ready, they flatten it into thick discs and place them onto small ceramic boards. The heat of the oven radiates outward, warming the air around them. It is still early, but already the day is warming. Egyptian mornings do not stay cool for long. With breakfast scents drifting across the village, the youngest residents begin to fully wake. Children tumble into the narrow streets, barefoot, laughing whisper-soft laughter. Even their play seems gentle, as if the heat teaches them to conserve energy. Some chase each other with bundles of reeds. Others sit quietly beside their parents, tracing shapes into the dust with sticks. A girl helps her father gather fresh dates from a drying rack. A boy feeds a goat with a handful of hay, grinning proudly as the animal nibbles. No one shouts. No one rushes. This is not a loud childhood. It is a steady one. Near the edge of the village, a weaver begins her morning. Her loom stands beneath a simple awning, shielding her from the sun. The threads, dyed with crushed plants and minerals, hang in vertical rows. She sits, ties her hair up, and begins to work. The loom creaks with each gentle pull. Thread passes over thread. Color merges with color. The pattern grows slowly, as it always does. She does not speak. She rarely does while weaving. Her mind is focused but calm, lost in the repetition. Nearby, a potter stirs clay in a basin. He checks the moisture of the mixture, lifting a handful and letting it drip slowly from his fingers. It is not yet perfect. He waits. Patience is the most essential ingredient in every craft here. Nothing in ancient Egypt is rushed. As the warming sun touches the tops of palm trees, the men of the village begin their workday. They gather farming tools, wooden hoes, long-handled plows, bundles of reed rope. They move with quiet purpose. The day will be long, but they have lived many days just like this one. A group of farmers set off toward the fields, following the narrow paths that wind between irrigation canals. The canals reflect the sunlight like ribbons of liquid gold. A father places his hand on his son's shoulder as they walk. The boy carries a basket of seeds. He steps carefully, proud to be helping. The farmers speak in low tones, their voices blending with the rustle of reeds and the soft splash of water as they cross a small wooden footbridge. They do not complain. They do not hurry. The Nile will dictate the pace of their labor. It always has.
By now the village is fully awakened, though awake here does not mean noisy. Life is active but gentle. The grinding of grain, once soft and solitary, now forms a chorus. The thump of wooden mortars echoes through doorways. The flap of linen drying in the breeze adds a quiet rhythm. A pair of women carry baskets of vegetables, speaking to each other in soft, measured voices. Their shadows stretch long across the ground. A priest passes by the edge of the village, heading toward a small local shrine. He carries a bundle of incense sticks. The morning offerings must be made soon. Near the riverbank, a fisherman's wife washes small clothes in the shallow water. She scrubs each garment slowly, rinsing it beneath the rippling surface. The fisherman himself sits beside her, repairing a tear in his net. His hands are steady, practiced. He ties knot after knot with the calm of a man who has repeated this process thousands of times. Their child, still half sleepy, sits between them, dangling his feet in the water. It is a scene as old as the river. By the time the sun stands a little higher, the shadows shorten. The air warms. The colors of the village soften from gold to pale beige, then to a warm, luminous clay. A group of men finish loading a small boat with harvested reeds. They push it gently away from the riverbank, the water parting in delicate ripples. The sisters who fetched water earlier return, their jars now full. They walk more slowly, balancing the weight on their shoulders with precise, practiced grace. A neighbor opens her door and waves them inside for a brief rest. They accept, stepping into the cool interior of her home. Hospitality here is subtle, not loud or lavish, but constant. It is around this time that the truth becomes clear. You wouldn't last a day in this village. Not because the people are harsh, not because the land is unkind, not because life is primitive, but because life here is steady, unchanging, unaffected by hurry, ambition, or the frantic pace of the modern world. Here, every action has the same unhurried tempo. A woman grinding grain, a potter shaping clay, a fisherman repairing his net, a child gathering dates, a farmer carrying a basket, a loom creaking gently, a goat chewing rhythmically, a reed swaying in the breeze. There is no urgency, no rush, no noise. To live here, you must surrender to slowness, to rhythm, to patience, to the soft heartbeat of the Nile. And that is why you wouldn't last a day. But if you could, even for a day, you would find a peace deeper than anything you have ever known. Bread is the quiet heartbeat of ancient Egypt. Not the pharaohs, not the temples, not the armies or the monuments. Just bread. Simple, unadorned, made by hands that have repeated the same movements for thousands of years. In this ancient village, bread is not simply food. It is ritual. It is routine. It is survival gently shaped into something warm and fragrant. And this chapter moves as slowly as the dough itself. The sun has now risen fully, but only just. Its early light stretches across the village like warm silk, slipping into homes through small clay windows and softening everything it touches. In one house, a family's bread-making is already underway. The mother sits beside a wide grinding stone. She leans forward, shoulders relaxed,
and begins the long, slow task of turning wheat into flour. Forward, back. Forward, back. The stone presses down with a soothing, repetitive motion. Each push creates a faint scraping sound, gentle, rhythmic, timeless. A daughter, perhaps 9 or 10, sits across from her, gathering the flour into a small basket. She works with a careful concentration that is both childlike and ancient. Wheat dust floats in the air, illuminated by a beam of sunlight streaming through the wall opening. It sparkles softly, tiny flecks suspended for a moment before settling. There is no talking. Words would only disturb the quiet ritual. The only sounds are the grinding stone, the soft exhale of the mother, the rustling of the child's hands as she gathers the flour, a pigeon cooing gently from a stable next door. This is how bread begins, not in the oven, but in the steady, patient rhythm of hands preparing the simplest ingredient. The wheat rested overnight in a clay jar, absorbing the coolness of the air. It is emmer wheat, the ancient grain of the Nile, older than empires, older even than many of the temples that rise along the riverbanks. Emmer is stubborn, harder to grind, coarser than modern wheat. But the people of Egypt know exactly how it should feel beneath the stone. The mother rubs a few grains between her fingers, testing how dry they are, how easily they break, how they sound when they fall into the basket. She listens. The sound tells her everything. She pours another handful onto the grinding slab. Her movements remain slow, unhurried, steady. No one here rushes to finish the task. This process cannot be forced. It must flow like the river, gradually, inevitably. When enough flour has gathered, the woman sets aside her grinding stone. She wipes her forehead gently with a piece of linen, not from exhaustion, but simply because the work is warm. The daughter places the basket of flour beside a wide mixing bowl. The bowl is clay, fired in a kiln years ago. Its surface is smooth from years of hands touching it, washing it, drying it in the sun. The woman pours the flour into the bowl. Then she adds water, slowly, carefully, from a small jar. The water is cool. It has just been carried from the river by her older daughter. When the first droplets touch the flour, a soft, earthy aroma rises. The scent of grain meeting water. Simple, ancient, grounding. The woman places her hands into the mixture and begins to knead. Her fingers curl, press down, fold the dough inward. It's a slow rhythm. Fold, press, turn, fold, press, turn. The dough grows heavier, elastic, warm from her hands. A faint sound emerges with each motion, the sticky pull of dough stretching, the soft thump of her hands meeting the bowl, the subtle sigh of breath as she works. Her daughter dips her fingers in oil, brushing a thin layer along the inside of another bowl. The oil glistens, light catches on its surface. Soon the dough will rest there, but not yet. Not until the kneading is complete. Outside, life continues at its gentle pace. A faint breeze drifts through the open doorway, carrying with it the smell of wet earth from the riverbank, the dryness of warming sand, the hint of wood smoke from a neighbor's hearth. The breeze cools the woman's arms as she kneads. Steam from the dough's warmth mixes with the fresh morning air. This moment, small as it may seem, is the essence of daily life. A quiet merging of work and nature, a tapestry of soft movements.
Nothing rushed, nothing forced. The woman lifts the dough, heavy now, smooth and ready. She places it gently into the oiled bowl. She covers it with a cloth. It must rest. The heat of the day will help it rise slowly, gently. While the dough sleeps, she tends to other tasks, wiping down the grinding stone, sweeping stray flour from the floor, checking the clay oven outside. The oven, a domed shape of sun-baked clay, still holds warmth from yesterday's fire. She crouches beside it, running her fingers along the smooth, curved interior wall. Warm, but not yet hot. She will add wood soon, not too much, just enough to wake the oven. Beside the oven sits a pile of slender sticks, branches trimmed from river reeds, palm bark, and dried roots. These were gathered days earlier and left to dry in the sun. The woman chooses each piece with intent. Thin sticks for starting the fire, thicker pieces for maintaining heat, a cluster of reeds to help the flames catch. She arranges them carefully inside the oven's small opening. A spark is coaxed from a piece of flint. The reeds kindle. The flame grows. It crackles softly, not loud, not intense, just enough to warm the clay dome. A faint smell rises, smoky and sweet. Smoke trails upward, curling into the air like a slow dance. The heat spreads gradually. Inside the house, the dough rests quietly, rising with the same patience as everything in this land. After some time, the woman returns to the dough. She removes the cloth, revealing a slightly puffed surface. Tiny bubbles have formed inside, just enough to lighten the texture. She divides the dough into several pieces. Each one is shaped into a round loaf with slow turns of her wrist. Her daughter watches closely, mimicking the motions with her smaller hands. Her loaves are uneven, lopsided, imperfect, but they are hers, and the mother smiles. They place the shaped dough onto wooden paddles. Each paddle is worn from years of use. The wood slightly darkened, the edges smoothed by countless loaves sliding across its surface. The woman dusts each loaf with a pinch of flour. She presses the tops gently with her fingertips, creating small dimples that will help the heat spread evenly. The dough is ready for the fire. The woman approaches the oven. Its interior glows with a soft golden orange light. Heat radiates outward, warming the air around her legs. She slides the first loaf inside, then another, and another. The smell begins almost immediately. Warm grain, smoke, a hint of sweetness from the flour itself. The aroma drifts outward, spreading through the alleyways, carried by the heat rising from the oven. Neighbors glance over, not in hunger, but in recognition. Bread is the common thread that ties every household together. As the loaves bake, the woman tends the fire. She adds small pieces of wood now and then. She watches the color of the oven's interior. This is not a timed process. There is no instruction beyond experience. The bread will tell her when it is ready, when its surface darkens just slightly, when the smell deepens, when a hollow sound emerges from the crust as she taps it. Time in this place is measured by the senses, by watching, by listening, by waiting. When the first loaf is ready, she uses a long wooden spatula to slide it out. The crust is golden, not shiny, not perfect, but rustic and warm. Steam rises from its surface. Her daughter watches in awe every morning, as if seeing bread for the first time in her life. The The woman places the loaf on a reed mat to cool. The mat absorbs the moisture, keeping the crust crisp. More loaves follow, each one placed carefully, lined in rows like small edible sunbursts. As the bread cools, the smell begins to weave through the entire community. A boy passing outside pauses for a moment. He inhales deeply, eyes half closed. He smiles without needing to see where the scent comes from. Across the village, a potter shaping clay notices the aroma drifting past him. He nods to himself. Bread means the day is truly underway. A farmer, returning briefly from the fields, stops in the doorway of his home. His wife hands him a small piece of the first loaf. He eats it slowly, savoring the warmth. Bread is a shared experience, universal, comforting, ancient. When all the bread is cooled, the woman wraps several loaves in linen. Her daughter places them carefully into baskets. Some will be eaten immediately, some saved for later, a few given to neighbors who helped the family earlier in the week. Egyptian villages function through quiet exchanges. Bread for labor, grain for pottery, help for help. There is no ledger, only memory and trust. This entire process, from grinding the wheat to shaping the loaves, has taken hours. But nothing feels long, nothing feels rushed. It is simply the rhythm of life. The woman sits for a moment on a low stool. The morning sun warms her back. A breeze slips into the courtyard. She breathes deeply, content. Her hands rest on her lap, tired, but in the gentle way that comes from completing a familiar task. The daughter sits beside her. She leans against her mother's arm, nibbling on a corner of freshly baked bread. There is no celebration, no applause, no acknowledgement beyond the small moment of shared silence. This is what daily life in ancient Egypt is. Simple tasks done with care, repetition that becomes tradition, quiet that becomes comfort. Bread, warm, fragrant, humble, is the center of it all. In ancient Egypt, clothing is simple, not ornate like the wall paintings might suggest, but humble, practical, and woven from the river itself. Linen is the everyday fabric of the land. It comes from flax, and flax comes from the Nile. And because the Nile floods with a rhythm older than memory, so too does the process of making cloth. This chapter is about that process, quiet, repetitive, gentle, unfolding in the slow pace of a life shaped by seasons rather than clocks. The day begins near the riverbank. Mist hovers above the water, blurring the line between river and sky. Flax plants grow in rows nearby, tall, thin stalks with pale blue flowers trembling lightly in the morning breath of wind. A woman bends to inspect them. She's older, perhaps in her 50s, with strong arms and eyes that carry decades of experience in the subtle craft of linen making. She touches each stalk not to judge it, but to understand it. She feels the firmness of the fibers, the dryness of the stem, the way the plant sways. These small details tell her whether the flax is ready to harvest. A younger woman stands beside her, waiting quietly. She is learning, watching every motion, absorbing every silence. The elder nods, finally, and they begin. They pull the stalks by hand, not cut, because every part of the plant is needed. The roots, the stem, the seed pods. Nothing is wasted. The sound of the harvest is soft, a whisper of roots leaving the earth, a small snap as stalks brush one another, the faint splash of river water as stalks are carried to soak.
These sounds drift gently across the field, disturbing nothing, joining the natural rhythm of the morning.
The stalks are laid in the shallow edge of the river to soften. This process, retting, is slow, and so the narration slows to follow it. The river water moves lazily. It glides around the bundles of flax, cool and smooth. Dragonflies skim the surface. The sun climbs higher, making the water shimmer. Reeds sway in long, steady arcs. The flax must stay here for days, not watched constantly, not stirred or tended, just left in the embrace of the river. Nature does most of the work. Fibers loosen, outer layers soften, the core remains strong. The village women return each day to check the progress, but their checking is as gentle as the river's movement, lifting a stalk, pressing it lightly with thumb and forefinger, smelling the sweetness turning slightly earthy. When the fibers slip from the stem with ease, the flax is ready. The bundles are lifted from the river, water dripping back into the current in long, clear threads. The stalks are spread across wide reed mats near the houses. They lie in the sun, neatly arranged, a pale golden carpet warming slowly under the heat. Children run nearby, but they're careful. They've grown up with this craft and know not to disturb the drying mats. The sun bakes the moisture away. Hours pass quietly. The stalks become crisp. As the flax dries, the village remains unhurried. A potter shapes clay at the edge of the courtyard. A man repairs a fishing net. A dog sleeps in the shadow of a date palm. Life doesn't pause for the flax, but moves around it, acknowledging its presence without rush or urgency. When the flax is ready, the women gather again. The elder takes a bundle and snaps the dry stalk. It breaks cleanly, leaving the soft fibers inside exposed. Now begins the noisy part of the process, though in this world, even noise is gentle. A wooden tool is used to break the stalks further. The sound is a muted crack, rhythmic and deliberate. Children gather nearby, watching. They love this part, not for excitement, but because the sound is comforting, like hearing someone chop firewood before a quiet evening. Once the stems have been broken, the fibers are combed. A set of wooden combs with long, spaced teeth is used. The fibers are drawn through them repeatedly, each stroke making the strands finer. The motion is beautiful in its simplicity. Pull, straighten, pull, release. Soft fibers collect in piles, the raw beginnings of linen. The combing continues for hours, but the pace never changes. Slow, calm, uninterrupted. This is not work that rewards speed. The fibers respond only to patience. When enough fiber has been combed, the spinning begins. A simple wooden spindle is used. The elder woman sits cross-legged on the ground. Her movements are so fluid that the spindle seems to spin with a life of its own. She takes a lock of flax, twists it gently between her fingers, and lets the spindle pull the strand into thread. The younger woman watches and follows suit. Her first threads are uneven, thick in places, thin in others. The elder smiles, never correcting verbally, only demonstrating again, slowly. The spindle whirls, the thread lengthens, the fibers tighten into something strong. Nothing in this process is rushed. A good thread is born from steady hands, not hurried ones. Wind carries the faint scent of river and straw. Somewhere in the distance, a donkey brays lazily. The village cat curls beside the spinning women,
purring with a rhythmic vibration that seems to match the turning of the spindle. This is the part of the craft where time seems to drift into stillness.
Inside one of the homes, a vertical loom stands against the wall. It has been in this house for years, passed from mother to daughter, used daily, touched by countless hands. The spun threads are arranged carefully onto the loom. The warp threads, long vertical strands, are tied one by one. Each knot is purposeful. Each thread is positioned with quiet attention. The loom creaks slightly as the threads tighten. It is a soft, familiar sound, like an old friend stretching their limbs. Sunlight filters through a slit window, creating thin stripes of warm gold across the hanging threads. Dust motes float through the air, moving slowly, glittering like tiny drifting stars. The room feels sacred, not because of any ritual, but because of the calm that settles here whenever weaving begins. Now the weaving starts. The elder woman lifts the weft thread, the horizontal thread, and slips it between the warp threads. The younger woman uses a wooden beater to press the weft tightly into place. The sound is soft, steady. Tap, slide, tap, slide. Over and over, hour after hour. The cloth gradually grows downward, forming a sheet of pale, smooth linen. The process is repetitive, but not dull. Each movement is part of a dance that the hands have practiced 1,000 times. Outside, the sun shifts. Inside, the cloth lengthens. Thread by thread, moment by moment. No one rushes. Weaving is not about finishing. It is about maintaining the rhythm of the craft and the day. By late afternoon, the woven cloth has grown long and heavy. The women pause, not because they are tired, but because daylight is fading. Oil lamps are lit one by one, their flames flickering gently against clay walls. The room glows with a warm amber light. The loom stands tall and silent now, its day's work hanging peacefully. The elder strokes the woven fabric with her fingertips. It is smooth, cool, soft in a way only linen can be. She nods. The cloth is good. The younger woman smiles, relieved and proud. They cover the loom for the night, protecting the threads from dust. Outside, the village settles into its evening pace. A pot of lentils simmers slowly on a hearth. A man rolls up his fishing nets for the next morning. A child's laughter echoes softly before fading into the night. The air turns cool, carrying the scent of wet earth. The linen hangs quietly, reflecting the firelight like a pale waterfall. In many ways, linen is more than cloth. It is identity. It is the material of everyday garments, the wrappings of the dead, the sails of boats, the covers of beds, the offerings to temples. When people think of Egypt, they think of stone, statues, pyramids, tombs. But beneath the stone is linen. Soft, wearable, flexible, essential. It is the silent partner of civilization, woven thread by thread with patience and care. As night deepens, the elder woman sits outside her home. She watches the stars appear, bright and sharp in the dry desert air. Her hands rest on her knees, fingers relaxed after a long day of spinning and weaving. A linen tunic hangs nearby, swaying gently in the night breeze. It is nothing extraordinary to her, just cloth, just thread. But to us, looking back thousands of years later, it represents something profound. Daily life, quiet labor, and the beauty found in repetition. The kind of beauty that reveals itself only when you slow down. Bread and beer. Two things that shaped the rhythm of ancient Egyptian life more than kings, more than battles, more than monuments carved into stone. Here, in a quiet village near the Nile, the heart of daily life is not the temple, nor the marketplace, but the humble household kitchen. Not a kitchen as we know it today. No metal pots, no stoves, no clattering utensils. Just clay, stone, wood, and the steady hands of women who have inherited their craft from mothers and grandmothers going back hundreds of generations. This chapter enters that quiet space where the air smells of yeast and earth, and where the simplest ingredients become the very foundation of ancient Egyptian survival. The sun has not yet risen. The desert sky is a deep bluish gray, cool and still. Inside a small mud brick home, a faint glow appears. A single clay lamp is lit. A woman sits beside a large woven basket filled with barley. Her posture is relaxed. Her movements are slow. The quiet is almost sacred. She takes a handful of grain and spreads it across a shallow basket tray. With gentle taps, she shakes it back and forth. Light chaff rises into the air like floating dust motes and drifts away. This is the first step, cleaning the grain. A task so old that even she does not know when the technique began. Outside, the sound of a donkey snorting softly breaks the silence for a moment, but quickly fades. The village is still asleep. But the kitchen must begin early, because bread is not simply baked. It is prepared over many hours. As dawn begins to lighten the sky, the woman moves to the corner of the room where a large stone saddle quern rests on the floor. The shape is familiar, a slanted slab of stone worn smooth from decades of use. Beside it lies a hand stone, rounded, heavy, perfectly shaped for its purpose. She kneels, settles her weight evenly, and pours a handful of cleaned grain onto the flat stone surface. Then the grinding begins. Forward, backward, slow, steady strokes. There is a soft hiss as stone meets grain, followed by the low rumble of tiny husks being crushed. The sound is soothing, almost hypnotic. A second woman enters, a daughter or perhaps a niece. She sits beside the first, and without a word begins grinding at the second quern. Their motions synchronize naturally. A slow rhythm settles. Shh, 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 shh. In ancient Egypt, this was the early morning music. Not the singing of birds, not the ringing of bells, but the gentle grinding of grain into flour. The smell intensifies as the grain warms from friction. Earthy, slightly sweet, with a hint of toasted aroma. By the time the sun breaks fully over the horizon, the women have filled several baskets with coarse, warm, freshly ground flour. This is the foundation of the day's bread, and of nearly every meal in this village. The flour is sifted by hand, separating the fine powder from the rougher bran. The fine flour will become bread. The bran will feed animals or be added back into the dough to stretch it further. Now comes the mixing. The woman pours water from a clay jar into a large kneading bowl. The water is cool, drawn from the river before sunrise. She sprinkles flour into the bowl, a handful at a time. Not measured, judged by sight, by feel,
by instinct. The dough thickens gradually. She reaches in with both hands and begins to fold and press the mixture. Her motions are slow and rhythmic. The bowl creaks softly with each push. A faint sour aroma rises. Part of yesterday's fermented dough has been saved and added today. This is the secret of Egyptian bread. A continuous cycle, a living ingredient passed down from day to day. The dough becomes elastic, sticky, warm from the friction of kneading. Another woman adds barley flour to stretch the wheat. Wheat is difficult to grow, barley is common, so most bread is a mixture of both. By mid-morning, the dough is smooth and ready to rest. It sits covered with cloth, quietly fermenting, alive and breathing in its own slow way. Outside the home, the village hearth comes alive. A round clay oven, taller than a person, stands like a warm, dusty giant in the courtyard. Its surface is cracked with age, but still sturdy. The inside is dark, cool, waiting. The women gather dried reeds, palm fibers, and small pieces of wood. They place them gently inside the lower opening of the oven. A spark, a breath of air, and the fire catches. Flames grow slowly, not violently. They curl upward, painting the inside of the oven with flickers of orange. The crackling sound is soft, not a roar, not a blaze, just a steady whisper of burning reeds. Smoke rises from the top vent and drifts lazily into the desert air. Children gather nearby, fascinated by the sight of fire, but the women gently motion them back. The oven heats gradually. Too hot and the bread burns. Too cool and it will not bake properly. Patience guides every step, just as it does in weaving or pottery or any ancient craft. While the dough rests and the oven heats, another quiet ritual begins. Beer. Not the modern drink. Egyptian beer was thick, nutritious, closer to liquid bread than an intoxicant. A woman breaks apart old loaves that were baked specifically for brewing. Dark, coarse, rich. She places the pieces into a large ceramic vat filled with warm water. The bread softens, melts slightly, forming a thick mush. Another ingredient is added: germinated grains, crushed lightly. This mixture ferments for hours, sometimes days, until it reaches the desired balance of sweetness and tang. There is no rush. Beer follows its own slow timeline, guided by warmth, by air, by time. The smell is sour, earthy, but comforting. Children drink a weak version with almost no alcohol. Adults drink it as part of meals. Workers drink it for strength. Bread and beer, the twin anchors of Egyptian diet, both born in the quiet rhythm of the household kitchen. By midday, the dough is ready. It has risen slightly, its surface puffy, alive. The women dust their hands with flour and begin shaping the loaves. Some are small and round, perfect for daily meals. Others are tall cones used for offerings at the temple. A few are flat discs meant for quick baking, food for workers or for travelers. Each loaf is shaped with a calm, steady motion. No one counts the minutes. No one measures exact sizes. The goal is nourishment, not perfection. Tiny cracks form on the dough's surface as it waits to be baked. The smell is warm, inviting, like a promise of comfort. The oven is hot now, the kind of heat you can feel even from a distance. The women use long wooden paddles to place the dough against the inner walls of the oven. The loaves cling to the hot clay surface.
This method creates crusts that are both chewy and crisp, a texture unique to these ancient bread ovens. A soft hiss escapes as moisture meets heat. Inside the oven, the dough puffs slightly, turning golden. The scent of baking bread fills the courtyard, drifting into nearby homes. It is not a strong scent, just warm, grainy, comforting. Women move calmly, occasionally adjusting the fire below. There is no timer, only experience. When the bread is ready, they slip the wooden paddle inside, tap the loaf gently, and listen for a hollow sound. That sound tells them the bread is done. The family gathers outside under a simple canopy of reeds. The meal is modest: fresh bread, thick beer, a bowl of lentils, a few dried dates, maybe some onions or fish if the morning was generous. But the atmosphere is peaceful. No rushing, no loud conversation. Just the quiet sounds of bread tearing softly, liquid pouring into clay cups, wind brushing against palm leaves. Children eat slowly, sleepy from the warm air. Adults settle into silence, a restful pause before afternoon tasks begin. Bread is passed around, beer is sipped. A gentle calm hangs in the air. For a moment, time seems to stretch out, long and warm, like the desert horizon. As the children rest and the heat grows stronger, the women continue working. Bread is not baked only for today, but for the coming days. Some loaves are dried intentionally to last longer. Others are baked harder so they can be broken into beer vats later. The courtyard remains peaceful. Shadows shift. A chicken scratches at the ground. A cat sleeps in the shade. The rhythm continues, shaping, baking, cooling, stacking. The baskets fill gradually with warm, fragrant loaves. As the sun begins to sink, the last loaves are removed from the oven. The fire is allowed to die slowly, crackling softly as the embers cool. The women clean their tools, stacking bowls and brushing flour from the kneading board. The kitchen returns to its quiet, resting state. The air carries the faint scent of baked grain and warm clay. Inside the house, children doze. Outside, men talk softly about the next day's work. The woman who began the day with cleaning grain now sits beside the door, legs stretched, watching the sky shift from gold to purple to deep blue. She listens to the gentle sounds around her, the whisper of evening wind, the distant splash of a fish in the river, the rustle of palm fronds brushing against one another. And she breathes deeply, the slow inhalation of someone who has spent her day creating sustenance. Not a grand feast, not a celebration, just the simple, essential bread that keeps her family alive. But in these quiet moments, with the warmth of the day fading and her hands finally at rest, she feels a sense of calm, a sense of continuity, a sense that tomorrow will unfold gently, just as today did, guided by the same soft rhythm of earth, grain, and fire. Let us drift now into the quiet pulse of everyday labor in ancient Egypt. Not the grand works, the pyramids or colossal temples, but the simple, gentle work that carried the kingdom through its seasons. Farmers bent over irrigated fields, potters shaping clay on slow-turning wheels, stone cutters humming soft tunes as they carved small figurines, and women grinding grain in sunlit courtyards. The work that was uncelebrated, yet essential. The work that unfolded not in grand monuments, but in quiet villages under soft morning mist rising above the Nile. And so we begin, in a landscape painted with the muted gold of early dawn. Gentle, unhurried, meditative. The first colors that stretch across the sky are pale lavender, fading into dusty rose. The Nile glimmers like brushed metal. In its shallow waters, reeds sway with a rhythm as slow as breathing. Farmers are already awake, not hurried, just quietly adjusting to the day. Their tasks are guided by the river, the seasons, and the steady, predictable pattern of life that has shaped Egyptian villages for thousands of years. A farmer steps out of his small mud brick house. He ties a simple linen cloth around his forehead. His home is modest, a single room, a low stool, a sleeping mat rolled in the corner, a basket of barley stored carefully away from moisture. Nothing extravagant, yet nothing lacking, just enough. He pauses in the doorway, letting the first breeze of morning move past him. The scent of damp earth, river reeds, and cooling ash from the hearth drifts in the air. He breathes slowly. This is how life has always been. Irrigation is the lifeblood of Egypt, but it is not a frantic activity. It is slow, steady, patient. Workers open small earthen channels, letting the river's water pool into square and rectangular plots. They carry shadoofs, simple wooden levers with weights and clay buckets, lifting and dropping water with a slow, rhythmic motion. Up, down, up, down. The sound is soft and predictable, like the ticking of a distant clock. There is a kind of peace in this repetition, a meditative quality. The farmer does not rush. He knows the fields will absorb what they can, and no amount of urgency will make the crops grow faster. The Nile determines the rhythm. Humans simply follow it. A younger worker nearby, perhaps 12 or 13 years old, steadies the shadoof with hands still adjusting to labor. His father corrects him gently. No raised voice, no frustration, just calm instruction. Everyone here was once taught in the same way. Once the water is flowing through the narrow canals, the farmers begin their slow walk between rows of young crops. They move gently, careful not to disturb the fragile stalks. Barley, flax, wheat, onions, lentils. The earth gives off a warm, organic scent, loamy, rich, alive. Birds circle overhead, not lively or loud, but drifting as though painted into the scene. Farmers in ancient Egypt didn't work in silence. They hummed soft melodies, simple notes passed down through generations, songs without owners or composers. A few words are occasionally exchanged about the weather, the soil, the level of the river, and the hopes for the harvest. Never rushed, never urgent. As the farmers settle into their day, we drift to another part of the village, a cluster of humble workshops. This is the potter's quarter. The air is thick with the scent of damp clay, wood smoke, and heated earth. The soundscape is soft, hands smoothing, shaping, pressing, wheels turning in slow, deliberate rotations, straw crackling in the kilns. A potter sits cross-legged beside his wheel. His movements are not hurried but thoughtful, almost ceremonial. He wets his hands, leans forward slightly, and the wheel begins to spin. It is not a rapid spin, just enough to coax the clay upward. He breathes deeply, letting his hands guide the shape without forcing it. The pot begins to rise under his touch, a small jar, perhaps, or a simple bowl used for grinding herbs or storing grains. The potter does not look over his shoulder to check how many vessels he has completed. Ancient Egyptian craftsmen worked through flow, a gentle, steady pace designed to maintain quality and presence of mind. Everything is made with intention. Behind him, another potter applies red slip to a jar, carefully, smoothly, creating a soft, matte finish that will deepen when fired. No piece is hurried. No shape is rushed. Not far from the potters, a group of stone cutters works beneath a linen awning. The shade is pale and cool. The air hums with a soft tapping rhythm, stone against stone, chisel against limestone. Their work is not the grand carving of monumental statues or royal tomb inscriptions. These are everyday artisans making small items, amulets, beads, figurines, cosmetic palettes, objects meant for homes, markets, shrines. The tools are simple: wooden mallets, copper chisels, sandstone grinders. The sound of their tools blends into a calming pattern. Tap, 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 tap. Slow, measured. There is no rush in their craft. A bead may take an hour. A pallet may take 2 days. No one tries to accelerate the process. Stone yields only with time and patience. Meanwhile, the women of the household begin their rhythms of daily life. Some grind grain using a heavy stone quern. The motion is slow, circular, steady, grain turning into flour with a soft, sandy whisper. Others weave linen on vertical looms, fingers guiding thread with a softness that seems to come from instinct rather than thought. In the corner, a mother kneads dough for bread, pressing gently, folding patiently. Bread in ancient Egypt was dense, nourishing, and mildly sweet, often baked with dates or honey. Nearby, a pot of lentils simmers over a small fire. The scent is comforting, earthy, warm, familiar. Children run quietly around the courtyard, their play soft and unintrusive. They trace shapes in the dust. They stack smooth stones. They laugh in small, gentle bursts of joy. There is no sharpness to the moment. Everything feels softened by the warm air and the simplicity of life. As the sun approaches its zenith, the workers gather under a large sycamore fig tree near the edge of the village. The shade is expansive, the air cooler. The tree's branches arch like protective arms, leaves fluttering gently in the wind. They unwrap small bundles of food tied with linen strips: bread, onions, figs, pieces of dried fish. A simple meal, a slow one. No one eats quickly. They savor, talk softly, or simply rest. A potter stretches his legs, tipping his head back with eyes half closed. A farmer leans on his elbows, tracing patterns in the sand. Someone brings a jug of cool water from the river, beads of condensation collecting on the clay surface. The conversation drifts like the breeze. Light stories, small observations, memories of last year's flood, hopes for the coming harvest. Nothing heavy, nothing urgent. Just a quiet pause in the long day. After lunch, the heat settles over the land like a soft blanket. The fields shimmer. Work slows to its gentlest pace. Farmers lean against their tools. Potters let freshly shaped pieces dry in the sun. Stone cutters take longer breaks between each round of carving. Even the animals, donkeys, goats, cattle, move minimally, seeking shade in the calmest corners. Egyptians understood the rhythm of the environment. They did not push against the heat. They flowed with it, allowing the body to move in harmony with the world around them. Time loses definition.
Hours seem to stretch into a warm haze.
As the sun lowers, the light softens into warm amber. Work resumes, but gently. Farmers check the channels, adjusting water flow. Potters inspect vessels that have dried enough to carve simple patterns. Stonecutters clean their tools, completing one last small figurine before stopping for the day. The world feels quieter now, the air cooler, the colors softer, gold, peach, dusty lavender. The Nile reflects the sky like a mirror. Birds settle in the reeds. There is a sense of completion, of tasks carried out with care and without haste. As darkness approaches, villagers gather outside their homes. A few small fires burn. The smoke rises slowly, curling like thin ribbons. Families sit together on woven mats. Children lean against their parents. Neighbors greet one another with warm familiarity. Stories are told, not dramatic tales, but simple ones. A fisherman describing a strange turtle he saw. An old woman recalling a festival from her youth. A young girl recounting the first time she wove a piece of linen without mistakes. The stars begin to appear one by one. The night is warm, gentle, calm. The village settles into a quiet that feels ancient and eternal. Night has now fully settled across the village, but the day is not yet over. Inside each small mud brick home, gentle domestic tasks continue beneath the warm glow of oil lamps. These lamps burn a mixture of animal fat and fragrant oils, and the flame dances softly, casting rounded golden shadows that sway against the clay walls. A woman sits with her daughter, showing her how to mend a linen tunic. The thread slips quietly through the cloth, making a soft, rhythmic whisper. They speak in low voices, their tone closer to breath than to sound. In another house, a father carefully sharpens the blade of his wooden plow using a small piece of stone. The scraping sound is slow, steady, unintrusive. He pauses often, feeling the edge with his thumb, nodding to himself in satisfaction. A potter checks the cooling kiln outside, holding his hand near the opening to sense how quickly the heat is fading. He does not rush. Cooling is a patient process, and the vessels inside must transition gradually from fire to night air. His shadow stretches long across the ground as he moves with unhurried purpose. Nearby, two children chase a flickering beetle carrying a tiny ember on its back, a natural lantern, common along the riverbanks. They laugh softly, careful not to disturb the resting adults. Not everyone in this village works with clay or soil. A quiet corner of the settlement belongs to the scribe, a figure respected yet unobtrusive, someone who observes life more than he interrupts it. His room is simple, though filled with small treasures. Rolled papyri, reed pens sharpened to fine points, bowls of soot ink, palettes stained with years of careful work. He sits cross-legged beside a low wooden table, documenting the day's activities. Not dramatic stories, merely records of grain distributions, livestock counts, exchange agreements, marriages, and small debts between neighbors. To him, these simple entries are the threads that hold the community together. He writes slowly, deliberately. His reed pen makes a soft, scratching rhythm on the papyrus, a sound both delicate and steady. Beside him, a half-finished sketch of a lotus blossom rests against the wall. He had drawn it earlier that afternoon while pausing near the river. In Egypt, scribes often balanced administrative work with small pieces of art, not for pride, but for reflection. Now, in the quiet glow of his lamp, he dips his pen into ink again and writes the last line of the day with gentle intention.
And when he finally sets the pen aside, the room exudes an air of peaceful completion.
Step outside again. The village is wrapped in the kind of silence that never feels empty, only serene. Crickets chirp from dark corners. The Nile, not far away, murmurs with its endless flow. Occasional rustles come from palm trees as the wind brushes through their fronds. Dogs stretch lazily near doorways. Goats settle into small shelters. Even the donkeys, usually restless, seem to breathe more slowly at night. Above everything, the stars shimmer with startling clarity, a celestial canopy so bright it feels almost close enough to touch. Ancient Egyptians believed these stars were souls sailing across the sky, guided by the divine. Many villagers slept outdoors during the warmer months, allowing themselves to drift to sleep beneath the quiet glitter of this heavenly river. A mother finishes her tasks, spreads a woven mat outside her door, and lies down beside her children. She watches the stars in silence, her breathing syncing with the slow rhythm of the night. This is a world where time moves differently, where work gives way to rest with natural grace, not by schedule or alarm. Sleep in ancient Egypt was not simply rest. It was believed to be a crossing, a meeting point between the mortal world and the realm of gods and ancestors. They slept knowing dreams carried meaning. A young farmer drifts into sleep, imagining a field overflowing with tall barley. To him, this symbolizes blessing, a good sign from the gods. A potter dreams of clay spinning endlessly under his hands, smooth and unbroken. He sees this as peace. A child dreams of bright birds flying above the river. To her, these are good spirits watching over the family. Dreams are not rushed or dissected. They simply exist, flowing softly through the mind like water through reeds. The village sleeps under the moon's calm glow, each person wrapped in a quiet blend of exhaustion and hope. The quietest moment of the day arrives just before sunrise. It is a moment without movement, without birdsong, without footsteps. Villagers remain wrapped in their mats. The fire pits have cooled into soft embers. The air holds a gentle chill. Even the river seems to pause. In this suspended silence, one can almost feel the presence of time itself, steady, unbroken, eternal. Then, slowly, the horizon begins to glow. Not dramatically, but in a whisper of light. The stars fade one at a time. Palm trees emerge from the darkness in soft silhouettes. A rooster calls from somewhere near the river. A woman stirs from her mat, stretching slowly, her face still half asleep. A potter opens one eye, then the other, adjusting to the dim light. The world does not leap into action. It eases into wakefulness. The day begins exactly as the last one did, softly, gently, without urgency. With dawn beginning its slow bloom over the land, the village prepares to repeat the same rhythm as the day before. The farmer retrieves his tools. The potter cleans yesterday's clay from his hands. The stonecutter inspects a new piece of limestone. Children wake and yawn, rubbing sleep from their eyes. Life here does not depend on novelty. It finds comfort in repetition, the kind of repetition that creates stability, community, and a sense of belonging. Ancient Egyptian villages were woven from cycles: the cycle of the Nile, the cycle of seasons, the cycle of work, the cycle of rest. And so,
As the sun begins to rise again, the village returns to its labor. Slow, steady, harmonious. Not all work takes place on land. As the sun settles comfortably above the horizon, its light gliding across the surface of the Nile, a small group of fishermen push their papyrus boats into the calm water. These boats are light, flexible, made from tight bundles of papyrus stalks, and glide almost silently over the river. The fishermen use long wooden poles to steer, pushing gently against the riverbed. Their motions are unhurried, the poles sliding gracefully through the water with barely a ripple. They enter the reed-filled shallows, where small fish gather to escape the current. One fisherman casts a woven net in a wide, slow arc. The net descends gently, like a curtain settling over the river. Another uses a simple spear, holding it steady, patient, waiting for just the right movement beneath the water's surface. But there is no tension in his posture. Fishing here is as much about waiting as it is about catching. The river has always provided, and the fishermen trust its rhythms as they trust the turning of the seasons. A small catch will feed a family. A larger one will be shared among neighbors. Either is welcomed with quiet gratitude. Further inland, the work of flax preparation unfolds, a task central to Egyptian life, yet rarely depicted in dramatic histories. Flax grows in gentle clusters, tall and slender, with pale blue flowers that sway lightly in the breeze. Women gather the stalks, pulling them carefully from the ground with practiced hands. The bundles are tied together loosely and placed in shallow pools near the village, where they will soak for several days. This soaking process softens the fibers, preparing them to be beaten, combed, and eventually spun into linen thread. Each stage is slow. Each stage is rhythmic. A woman lifts handfuls of fibers from the water. She holds them up to the sun, examining their softness, letting droplets fall like shining threads back into the pool. Then she carries the flax to a smooth, flat stone. There, with a wooden mallet, she lightly taps the fibers, loosening them further. The sound is soft, repetitive, almost lulling. When the fibers are ready, they are combed through a set of wooden teeth, forming thin strands. Nearby, another woman sits at her loom, working with those same strands, weaving them into a bolt of linen, the fabric that clothes nearly everyone in Egypt. The linen is not bright white. Its natural color is a gentle sandy cream, softened by sun and years of washing. The entire process, from seed to garment, is long and delicate, and yet no one rushes it. Near the workshop district, the sound of wood being shaped is steady and patient. Egyptian carpenters worked with native woods like acacia, tamarisk, and sycamore fig. Strong, smooth-grained, fragrant materials that responded well to careful hands. A carpenter now sits beside a half-finished stool, smoothing the surface with a piece of sandstone. He works in long, even strokes, each motion following the grain so as not to tear the wood. His son sits nearby, watching, holding a small chisel that he is still learning to use. From time to time, the father hands him a small task, shaving the corner of a leg, tapping in a wooden dowel. The boy's work is clumsy but earnest. The father never raises his voice. Mistakes are simply softened, reshaped, or started again. The carpenter's workshop contains wooden boxes with sliding lids, bed frames with woven cords, tools with handles shaped to fit comfortably in hand, simple, elegant chairs, carved animal figurines painted in faded colors. Nothing extravagant, but everything crafted with care. Wood dust flush in the light, A humming tune drifts through the air. The scene feels timeless.
Along the river's edge, where marsh grasses grow tall and plentiful, the basket weavers begin their quiet work. Their materials come straight from the Nile: reeds, rushes, palm fibers, soft materials that bend easily but hold firm when woven. A woman sits cross-legged on the ground, weaving a large basket for storing grains. Her hands move with even, practiced rhythms. Over, under, pull tight. Over, under, pull tight. Beside her, a man works on a finer basket, destined for the market. A container delicate enough to hold fruit or dried herbs. Children gather small reeds, handing them to the adults in bundles. No one rushes. The work flows naturally, like a gentle stream. Baskets in Egypt were everywhere, in houses, on boats, in workshops, in markets. They held life's daily objects: bread, linen, tools, crops, fish, offerings for the gods. Though humble, a well-made basket could last for years. The weavers work in the shade where the breeze is cool, and the soft rustle of reeds blends with the river's whisper, creating a soundscape as calming as a lullaby. Though tea as we know it did not exist, the Egyptians brewed herbal drinks, infusions of mint, chamomile, hibiscus, and sweetgrasses. At midday, a small group of workers gather beneath an acacia tree where the shade is generous and cool. A potter pours warm herbal brew from a blackened clay pot into simple cups. They sip slowly, savoring the calming flavors. One of the villagers begins telling a quiet story, not a dramatic one, but something soft and humble, perhaps about a clever fox or a wandering spirit of the desert. The others listen with half-closed eyes. The story is not meant to excite. It is meant to settle the mind, to ease the hours between morning labor and afternoon heat. In ancient Egypt, stories flowed like water, gentle, familiar, comforting. As the hours move closer to the middle of the day, the heat becomes more assertive. It rolls across the village like a slow wave of warm air. In these hours, most heavy work pauses. Inside the workshops, artisans retreat to the shaded walls. Some lie on woven mats. Others sit quietly, letting their bodies rest while gently sharpening tools or checking the condition of their materials. The potter moves vessels deeper into the shade so they dry evenly. The stonecutter wipes sweat from his brow, stretching his legs. The carpenter leans against a wall, eyes closed but not fully asleep. The village becomes a tableau of stillness, not forced, but embraced. The heat outside is intense, but the workshops are cool and dim, filled with the fragrance of clay, wood, and stone. Even the dogs sleep deeply at this hour. As the sun begins to fall, the air becomes breathable again. This is when the small evening market forms. A few woven mats are laid on the ground. Some women bring baskets of onions, chickpeas, dates, and lentils. A potter lays out a row of clay bowls, each with its own subtle imperfections. A fisherman places his catch on a palm leaf tray, sprinkled lightly with river water to keep the fish cool. The market is not loud. Voices remain polite, gentle, relaxed. Haggling is almost ceremonial. One offer, a counter-offer softened by smiles. A final agreement that satisfies both sides. Children wander between mats, fascinated by bright beads or sweet figs. A scribe purchases a small piece of linen for wrapping scrolls. A carpenter trades a carved spoon for a handful of dates. The market lasts perhaps an hour, fading naturally as the shadows grow long. When the last glimmers of sunlight disappear behind the palms, the villagers begin closing their workshops and returning to their homes. The potter stacks his tools neatly. The farmer shakes dust from his legs and washes his hands. The carpenter covers his workspace with linen to protect it from night dew. A soft wind moves through the village. Fire pits are lit again, offering faint orange glow. Families gather for a simple meal: bread, fish, lentils, figs. Dinner is not rushed. It unfolds slowly, filled with quiet talk and long pauses. Night rises like a soft curtain, bringing cool air and gentle darkness. Soon, the village becomes a quiet constellation of small flames. Oil lamps flicker inside doorways. The river glistens under moonlight. Even the animals settle into their places for sleep. The world becomes still. At last, the day's gentle rhythm comes to its natural end.
In ancient Egypt, work was not merely a means of survival. It was an expression of harmony with the land, with the river, with time itself. Everything done slowly, done well, done with presence. From fields to workshops, from river to marketplace, the rhythm of work was steady and humane. There was pride in every action, even the smallest. Bread baking, water lifting, clay shaping, linen weaving, stone carving, fish catching, wood smoothing, basket weaving. Together, these simple acts form the quiet foundation of Egyptian civilization. Not the pharaohs, not the monuments, not the epics, but everyday people working gently, steadily, with patience and devotion. And as they finally lie down to sleep under the warm night sky, the stars look down on them with the same soft light that has guided the Nile for millennia. A day of peaceful labor ends. Another begins tomorrow. The rhythm continues, unbroken.
Before the rest of the Nile Valley stirs awake, long before the bustle of markets or the rhythmic chants of temple priests, there is a village whose heartbeat is much quieter, yet no less essential. A small settlement tucked away on a ridge above the floodplain. A village built not for farmers, not for soldiers, not for scribes, but for craftsmen. Deir el Medina, a name you may already know from history books, though the books rarely capture its true spirit. The gentle hush of its pre-dawn streets, the faint chiming of copper chisels stacked neatly against limestone walls, the soft murmur of drowsy greetings among neighbors who have known one another for generations. Here live the workers responsible for carving and painting the tombs of pharaohs. Ordinary men with extraordinary duties, crafting eternity for kings while living modest, almost fragile daily lives. The sun is still a thin line of pale gold above the desert cliffs. The air is cool, still carrying the breath of night. And as you walk the narrow pathways between whitewashed houses, you may feel as though time has stopped entirely. No shouting, no marketplaces, no clatter of ox carts, only the whisper of wind passing between mud brick walls and the slow awakening of a community that has spent centuries in patient, quiet labor. You are invited now not to witness the creation of grand monuments, but to spend a day among the artisans themselves, to feel the pace of their mornings, the rhythm of their work, the stillness of their evenings. A forgotten world not of pharaohs, but of gentle human routine. Inside one small house, a man stirs awake. Not with urgency. There is no rush here, no frantic morning scramble. Instead, his movements are patient, unhurried, shaped by decades of routine. He sits on the edge of a reed mat, stretching slowly, feeling the cool floor beneath his feet, listening to the muffled sounds of neighbors moving through their own rituals.
A faint aroma of warm barley bread drifts from a hearth next door. Somewhere outside, a clay jar is filled with new water, the splash echoing softly in the quiet. He washes his face with water cooled overnight, letting it drip down his chin, a moment of small gratitude in a world where water is life.
His wife hands him a simple breakfast, a piece of wheat bread, a small bowl of lentils, perhaps a sliver of dried fish if the family has had good rations recently. Their conversation is soft, almost whispered, not because they must be quiet, but because the world itself is still asleep, and they speak as though afraid to disturb it. A child stirs in a corner. Another morning begins. When he steps outside, the air is still cool, and the desert glow is spreading across the cliffs. He joins a small procession of fellow workers walking toward the Valley of the Kings. They do not hurry. They do not march. They simply walk, their tools wrapped in cloth, their sandals brushing the sand with a rhythmic, steady sound. Even in this gentle pace, you can feel the weight of what lies ahead of them. They are artisans of eternity, but they are also human beings carrying calluses, aches, worries, dreams, and the desire for a peaceful life. Beyond the village, the path leads upward into the desert hills. Stone dust clings to every surface: the ground, the cliffs, the tools, even the clothing of the men who work here daily. At the entrance to a newly carved tomb corridor, the workers pause, not for ceremony, but to take in a small breath, as though stepping into another world entirely. Inside, the air is cool, still, silent in a way the outside world never is. The space is dim, but steady lamps cast warm circles of light across the limestone walls. Dust floats lazily in the beams, moving with the slowness of deep water. The workers spread out, each to his place. The sculptors inspect yesterday's progress, gentle reliefs emerging from the stone like half-formed clouds. One man runs his fingers across a newly carved figure of a falcon-headed god. It is smooth, untouched by paint, still dreaming in pale stone. Another worker prepares a mixture of ochre pigments, carefully grinding them on a slab until the powder becomes as fine as desert sand. Dozens of hands move, but none work quickly. They are paced by centuries, not by hours. Every line must be perfect, every angle precise, every color enduring enough to last for generations of souls passing through the afterlife. Even the sound of carving is gentle, a rhythmic tapping, slow and steady, like soft wooden bells. These men are not building monuments for the living. They are crafting a world meant to be dark and silent forever. And so they work in a state of calm, as though matching the stillness of the future tomb. Around midday, the heat outside becomes harsh, but inside the tomb, the temperature remains cool and soothing. Still, the workers step outside for their midday rest, not because of the heat alone, but because routine and rhythm guide their lives as much as tools do. They gather in a shaded cluster of rocks. Lunch rations are simple: round loaves of bread, onions, salted fish, perhaps some figs if someone has been lucky in recent exchanges. Their conversations drift like warm wind, not urgent, not heavy, just small talk. The progress of a neighbor's new house, the antics of children, the behavior of a stubborn donkey, the latest temple tale someone overheard. One artisan shares a story of a dream he had the night before, believing it to be a message from a protective spirit. Another man laughs softly, not dismissive, only amused in that gentle, affectionate way friends use when they've shared years of identical mornings. Some workers rest with their backs against sun-warmed stones, closing their eyes. Others run fingers through sand, idly drawing shapes they don't intend to keep. This moment, quiet, uneventful, soft, is one of the truest glimpses into ancient Egyptian life. Not ritual, not grandeur, just rest, community, simple food under a broad sky. And then, with the same unhurried pace, they rise again and return to the tomb. The afternoon is devoted to painting. If morning carving shapes the bones of the tomb, then afternoon pigments give it breath. Bowls of red ochre, yellow ochre, green malachite, blue azurite, and carbon black are arranged like a palette from a forgotten dream. Painters kneel close to the walls, their brushes made from reeds or strands of animal hair. Their movements are delicate, precise, and so slow that one could watch for minutes before seeing a single stroke completed. Colors flow in gentle curves, gods seated on thrones, ceremonial boats drifting across sacred waters, spirits weighing the heart against the feather of Ma'at. Nothing is rushed. The paint must be perfect, even though few living eyes will ever see it once the tomb is sealed. It is meditative work, a form of prayer without words. If you could sit here quietly for an hour, you might forget the world outside entirely. The warm glow of lamps, the faint scent of mineral pigments, the slow breathing of men utterly absorbed in their craft. It becomes almost like watching time itself paint the walls. The sun lowers behind the cliffs, casting long shadows like dark fingers reaching across the valley. The workers gather their tools, dusting them off with the same gentle familiarity that a farmer might give to his oxen. The walk back to the village is quiet, even more serene than the walk out. Now the world is cooling. The breeze carries the scent of night, stone, dust, faint traces of cooking fires beginning to burn. When the men reach the village, children run to greet them, not loudly, but with that warm excitement that always surrounds returning loved ones. The houses glow in warm oranges and deep browns. Small lamps flicker in doorways. Women prepare dinners of stews, lentils, and warm beer. The sounds of life return, but they remain soft, gentle, as though the entire village is aware of its place on the edge of the desert, surrounded by ancient silence. Some workers sit outside their homes, mending sandals or sharpening chisels, their motions automatic from a lifetime of repetition. Others walk to the nearby well, filling jars, laughing quietly, sharing the day's small victories, a smooth carving, a nicely blended pigment, a moment of inspiration caught in the stone. After the evening meal, the village settles again into calm. A soft melody drifts from one courtyard, someone playing a small flute or simple lyre. Not a performance, just a quiet unwinding of the day. Neighbors sit in circles, sharing simple stories, tales of crocodile gods, trickster spirits, or ancestors who once served in the court of a long-forgotten pharaoh. Children listen with wide eyes, leaning against their mothers, their hair warm from the fire. Slowly, the sky deepens into a deep cobalt blue. Stars scatter across the heavens as though the gods themselves have painted them. The workers retreat inside their homes, lying down on reed mats, covering themselves in light linen. The air cools, the fire embers fade, and the village becomes silent once more, just as it was the night before, and the night before that, and countless nights across generations. Tomorrow, they will rise again and return to the tomb, not because of duty alone, but because the rhythm of their lives is tied to it, gentle, steady, like the beating of a quiet,
ancient heart.
Long before the world knew hospitals, before the word medicine existed as we understand it today, there were the sunlit courtyards and reed-scented rooms of ancient Egyptian healers. This chapter brings you into that soft space, where illness was treated not only with herbs and salves, but with whispers to the gods, careful observation, and the quiet empathy of a healer who understood the fragility of the human body as intimately as the rhythms of the Nile. The day begins before dawn in a small, shaded courtyard behind a healer's home. A gentle lantern glow flickers against mud brick walls. Herbs tied with string hang from wooden beams overhead. Mint, cumin, juniper, fenugreek, thyme, fragrant lotus petals, casting a mild perfume that drifts into the cool air.
A thick wooden table holds bowls of crushed minerals, grinding stones, folded linen strips, and simple tools whose design has hardly changed in thousands of years. It is a world of small gestures, careful preparation, and the understanding that healing is not a matter of urgency, but of gentle, patient work. The healer steps into the courtyard wearing a simple linen robe, eyes heavy with sleep, yet softened with calm focus. He breathes in the morning air and lets it settle into him the same way a scribe settles into papyrus or a farmer settles into the earth. A new day begins, quietly, slowly, with the lightness of a drifting reed boat. Every healer begins the day not by meeting patients, but by preparing the tools that make healing possible. The mortar stone is cleaned, not hurriedly, but with slow, circular movements that have been repeated for decades. A small jar of honey is uncorked, its golden surface catching the first rays of light. Honey in this world is not just sweet, it is sacred, a natural preservative, an antimicrobial balm, a gift from the bees of the sun god Ra. Bowls of crushed minerals, malachite, natron, ochre, are inspected one by one to ensure no coarse grains remain. Egyptian medicine depends on texture. A salve that is too rough might irritate the skin. One too smooth may not cling. Balance is everything. The healer also prepares reed brushes used for applying ointments, thin blades made of bronze for lancing abscesses, and clean strips of linen for wrapping wounds in careful layers. Every tool carries the memory of hundreds of past treatments. Every mark tells a story. Nothing feels new, but everything feels prepared, as though the work of healing existed long before the healer himself, and he is simply stepping into its stream. When the preparations are complete, the healer whispers a small prayer to Sekhmet, goddess of fierce protection, and another to Thoth, guardian of knowledge. Not out of superstition, but out of reverence for the fragile dance between life and illness. The first patient of the day arrives quietly, a farmer from a nearby village, lean from years of labor, but walking with a limp. His foot is swollen from stepping on a reed thorn, and though the injury appears simple, it is worsened over several days. He sits on a low stool while the healer kneels to examine the wound. The air is still. There is no panic, no alarm, only a soft silence shared between them. The healer washes the foot gently with water scented by crushed mint. He presses the skin with slow, deliberate care. A slight wince from the farmer, a nod of understanding from the healer. A poultice is prepared, ground cumin and myrrh mixed with warm honey. Its scent is earthy, calming. The healer applies the mixture slowly, as though painting on canvas. He wraps the foot in linen so thin that it breathes like fabric woven from river mist. There is a quiet dignity in the moment. The farmer,
who spends his days laboring under the sun, here becomes the one cared for, the one tended to, the one whose pain is seen and softened. Before leaving, the farmer bows his head, not deeply, just enough to express gratitude that words alone cannot convey.
Later in the morning, a mother arrives carrying a child whose forehead is warm with fever. The healer touches the child's cheek, closes his eyes for a moment, listening not with ears, but with the intuition of decades spent reading the language of bodies. The child is laid on a soft mat. The mother watches with worry, yet says nothing. Egyptians understood illness as a delicate balance between the body, the spirit, and the unseen forces of the world. The healer prepares a drink: crushed dates, chamomile, and water warmed gently over coals. He stirs it slowly until it thickens into a herbal tonic. As the child sips it in small, slow swallows, the healer places cool, damp cloths over his forehead. He sits beside the child and lightly chants a protective incantation, not in a dramatic voice, but in a soft rhythm that almost blends with the quiet rustling of the room. The mother exhales, relieved, not because the illness has vanished, but because she is no longer facing it alone. The healer instructs her to keep the boy in the shade, to wash his forehead with cool water, and to offer the tonic throughout the day. She bows her head deeply, holding her child close, and steps out into the warm sunlight with a heart slightly lighter than when she entered. By midday, the healer's courtyard grows peaceful again. The sun stands high, casting long beams that shimmer through hanging herbs. This is a moment of reflection. Not work, not rest, but something in between. The healer sits with a reed pen and small sheets of papyrus, recording the cases of the morning. Egyptian medicine is not chaotic guesswork. It is methodical, thoughtful, deeply observant. And so he writes quietly. Blood temperature warm, swelling moderate, herbal mixture applied, linen wrap replaced tomorrow. In the shade, he grinds more herbs. The rhythmic motion of the pestle feels almost meditative. He arranges ingredients in clay jars, each sealed with a small plug of linen, coriander for digestion, juniper berries for coughs, salt and natron for wounds, lotus petals for calming. A neighbor stops by to offer fresh mint leaves in exchange for a small salve. The interaction is brief, warm, based on trust built across years of small exchanges. The healer walks to a nearby well to rinse his hands and face. The cool water provides relief in the midday heat. And as he looks out across the quiet village, he knows this peace will last only a short while. The afternoon will bring new patients, new worries, new hopes carried on weary footsteps. But for this moment, there is only stillness. A warm, bright, silent stillness. In the afternoon heat, a scribe arrives, thin, pale from hours spent indoors, his shoulders stiff, his hand cramping from endless writing. He sits before the healer, rubbing his wrist gently, embarrassed by the mundanity of his ailment. But the healer does not laugh. He has seen wounds from plows, burns from kilns, stings from insects, and now aches from writing. Pain is pain. Work is work. Every labor leaves its mark. He examines the scribe's wrist with soft hands, feeling the tightened tendons, the delicate tremor that betrays fatigue. He prepares warm oil, sesame mixed with crushed lotus, and massages the scribe's arm with unhurried strokes. The oil glistens in the fading light. The scribe exhales, once, then again,
letting the tension fall away. The healer teaches him a small movement, clasping both hands and rotating the wrists with long, smooth circles. He advises rest, true rest, not simply pausing work to stretch. The scribe smiles, a rare moment of vulnerability softened by relief. He bows gently before heading home, his steps lighter than they were when he arrived.
Evening drifts into the courtyard slowly, like a soft veil settling over the world. The healer cleans his tools, wipes the table, closes jars with care. The sky is a gentle gradient from pale gold to deep rose. Birds settle on rooftops. The warm wind carries the scent of night-blooming flowers. He sits alone for a moment, hands resting on his knees, listening to the village around him. A pot bubbling from a neighbor's kitchen, children laughing in distant alleys, the low hum of a family speaking softly at their doorway. Life, unremarkable yet precious. He reflects on the day, the farmer's swollen foot, the feverish child, the weary scribe, the countless herbs crushed into fine dust, the moments of fear, the moments of calm, the quiet gratitude exchanged without extravagance. He knows that tomorrow will bring more. New wounds, new fevers, new stories. Life is unending, and so is the work of easing its burdens. He offers one final prayer, not rigid or ritualistic, but tender, asking for strength to continue healing and for peace to settle over every household tonight. The lamps fade, the stars rise, and another quiet Egyptian night begins. Evening settles slowly in ancient Egypt, never rushed, never abrupt. Light fades in a long sigh, like a curtain of gold being drawn gently across the land. And along the Nile, where life breathes in a rhythm older than kings, an entire world begins to soften. Far from the monuments and the courts of pharaohs, this chapter drifts among reed boats, quiet fishermen, linen-clad families gathering by the water, and the subtle, unspoken relationship the Egyptians held with the river they believed was alive, aware, and wise. Tonight, we simply follow the Nile as the sun recedes, and see what ancient Egyptians saw when the world turned blue and silent. As Ra descends on his journey toward the western horizon, the desert heat loosens its hold. Shadows stretch across the ground like long fingers of indigo, and throughout the small settlements that line the riverbanks, a certain calm begins to slip over the land. Workers return from their day, farmers wiping dust from their arms, scribes stretching their stiff wrists, fishermen docking their reed boats with tired but steady movements. Evening is the hour in which the communal heart of Egypt begins to beat a little more slowly. The soundscape softens. No rush, no urgency. Just the gentle lapping of the Nile, the rustle of papyrus reeds, a donkey braying somewhere in the distance, a clay pot settling into the earth with a dull, comforting thud. The Egyptians called the Nile Iteru, the river, but they also called it Hapi, a god, a being with moods, generosity, and a spirit that watched over them. As daylight dwindles, it is common to find people standing quietly by its edges, offering the remains of their evening bread or murmuring small thanks for another day lived under its protection. The river listens. At least, that is what they believe. And perhaps, in a sense, they are right. The fishermen of Egypt are not grand figures in historical records, yet their lives form one of the most peaceful rituals of the evening landscape. As the sky transitions from gold to rose, then to violet, Small reed boats drift across the surface of the Nile. No paddles splash loudly. No voices cut through the dusk. These boats move like shadows over a sheet of polished stone. Fishing at night is both practical and spiritual. Cool waters bring fish to the surface. Torches fixed to prows glow like tiny suns, attracting the curious movement of tilapia and Nile perch. One fisherman leans forward, holder of a simple woven net. He waits, listens, feels rather than sees. There is an ancient patience in this work, one that has persisted through millennia. Every movement is deliberate, crafted by generations before him. The smooth lowering of the net, the stillness required to become part of the river, the sudden precise sweep that brings the evening's catch glistening into the boat. Fish ripple like liquid silver. The torch flame flickers across their scales. The night deepens. This quiet choreography, unseen in grand murals, forms a kind of prayer, a way to live in harmony with a river that is both provider and power. Away from the boats, on the banks, families gather in the dimming light. Children who spent the afternoon playing chase around mud-brick homes now sit near their mothers, watching the sky soften into the deep blue of Egyptian night. Evening meals are modest, yet comforting. Stewed lentils thick with herbs, barley bread still warm from the communal oven, onions sliced into bowls, and, if fortune is kind, a piece of salted fish. There is little conversation, not because silence is required, but because this hour feels sacred. The air is cooler now. The breeze carries the scent of wet river plants, and the world seems to exhale, as though relieved to have made it through another day beneath the relentless sun. A grandmother hums a low melody, an old tune, perhaps older than the village itself, while weaving a small basket to store tomorrow's grain. Her fingers move without thought. She has woven countless baskets in her lifetime. Nearby, a father dips a clay jar into the Nile, raising it slowly to judge the clarity of the water. Egyptians do not drink directly from the river. Everyone knows it is dangerous. But they use its surface water for washing and boiling. To them, the Nile is a resource, but it is also a presence. No one approaches it carelessly. Children watch their reflections in the shallows. Their silhouettes flatten and ripple with the movement of the current. To them, this is normal life. Yet to us, looking back across thousands of years, the scene feels timeless, unhurried, peaceful, suspended. As if evening along the Nile has not changed at all. Egyptian music at night is not the loud or celebratory kind used in festivals. Instead, villagers play the soft instruments, the flute, the lyre, the single-stringed rabab, creating melodies gentle enough to blend with the hush of twilight. A young boy holds a simple reed flute. He plays a tune learned from his father, who learned it from his father before him. The notes float lightly over the water, soft, wandering, unanchored. The Nile accepts the sound, carrying it far into the darkening horizon. A woman hums along, her voice steady, her gaze lost across the river's glowing path. Another taps a clay cup lightly, producing a rhythm that is barely louder than footsteps on sand. Music brings the village together, not as entertainment, but as comfort. A reminder that even under the vastness of the sky, they are part of something shared. This nightly music becomes a kind of communal heartbeat, slow, steady, familiar. Nothing in Egypt moves quickly, not the river, not the work. not life itself, and certainly not the songs of evening. As the last streaks of orange vanish, the first stars appear, faint, almost shy, then brighter as the sky turns deep and endless. Ancient Egyptians knew the constellations well. They mapped the heavens with remarkable precision, using them to mark time, seasons, and spiritual cycles. Tonight, as in every night, they watch the star Sopdet, what we call Sirius, rise above the horizon. Its appearance in the early morning foretells the flood season, the lifeblood of Egypt. But even when not tied to a calendar, the stars offer comfort. A scribe sitting on a low stool gazes upward, letting the quiet of night seep into his bones. He has spent the day bending over papyrus, translating requests, recording harvest measurements, writing letters for the illiterate. His eyes are tired, but the stars soothe in a way words cannot.
Across the river, temple priests also step outside to observe the sky. Though they perform no formal ritual at this hour, the heavens are considered a living scroll, a divine message written in light. One cannot help but read it, even in silence. And so, people watch. Simply watch. No urgency, no need to interpret every symbol. The comfort lies in the stillness. For the Egyptians, the night sky is as much a part of home as the land or river. Though most Egyptians prefer to stay close to their homes after dark, some small movements continue along the riverbanks. Message delivered between nearby villages, fishermen returning with their late catches, traders moving quietly with donkeys whose steps create soft thuds on the earth. Tiny oil lamps flicker in mud brick windows. Reed torches glow beside doorways. A few boats glide by with floating lamps fixed at their bows, casting shimmering trails across the water. These lights are not bright. They do not illuminate the river. Instead, they offer just enough glow to signal presence, not to intrude upon the natural darkness. Egyptian nights are meant to be dark and soft, not broken by flames. The lamps burn with thick, slow oil. The wicks hiss gently, and every flame moves like a small, living thing. Night travel is deliberate, cautious, respectful. No one wishes to disturb the spirits believed to wander after dusk. The night is their domain, just as the day belongs to people. So the living move lightly, speaking in low tones, never calling across distances, never raising torches too high. The river, in return, keeps its calm. Back in the homes, simple, sturdy mud brick dwellings, families prepare for rest. Beds are not elaborate. Wooden frames covered with woven mats, topped with linen sheets softened from years of washing. Before sleeping, Egyptians perform small personal rituals. A mother smooths oil through her hair, combing it with a wooden pick worn smooth from long use. A father checks the household shrine, offering a small pinch of incense to whichever deity his family favors. Perhaps Hathor for loving protection, or Taweret, the protectress of childbirth and home. Children arrange their amulets beside their beds, a small clay Bess figure, a carnelian bead, a simple bronze charm. These objects, though humble, make them feel watched over. Lamps are dimmed. Doors are closed with reed latches. The air grows cooler as night deepens. The Nile murmurs softly in the distance, as though whispering a bedtime story to those who live by its side. Egyptians do not fear the night, but they respect it. Sleep comes gently here, unforced, unhurried. Just as everything else in this land of rhythm and ancient memory, night in ancient Egypt was never merely an absence of light. It was a realm of symbols,
a sacred passageway, a place where mortals might brush against the borders of the divine. To the ancient Egyptians, dreams were not random flickers of the mind. They were whispers from gods, warnings from ancestors, or messages from the unseen world that stretched beyond the desert's edge. Tonight, we walk slowly into that world. We wander through the light of flickering oil lamps, past the thresholds of quiet homes, and toward the shadowed courtyards of temples where the dreaming rituals of Egypt unfold. This chapter invites the listener to drift gently, as the ancient Egyptians did, into the soft, uncertain landscape of night visions. Nothing loud happens here, nothing dramatic. Only the slow, steady pulse of a civilization that believed sleep was its own kind of journey.
The village grows still after dusk. The wind lies low against the ground, as though even the air wishes to rest. Beyond the faint circle of lamplight inside each home, darkness settles deeply. The mud brick walls grow cool, the woven mats stiffen with night air, and families drift into silence one by one, their breathing blending with the distant murmur of the Nile. Inside these homes, sleep is not simply a bodily need. It is an act of trust. Egyptians believe the soul, called the Ba, leaves the body during sleep, wandering freely before returning at dawn. Because of this belief, many keep protective amulets close. A carved wooden Bess figurine, a shell etched with a small symbol, a thread of carnelian beads. Children fall asleep clutching them, their hands curled gently around the smooth stones. Outside, the stars shimmer like grains of powdered silver. Inside, a village begins to dream. In Egypt, dreams are never treated as coincidences. They are studied, interpreted, discussed at length over morning bread. Scholars write entire manuals on dream symbols. If one sees a crocodile, it may mean power. If one sees a cat, it may mean protection. If one sees falling water, it may warn of emotional turmoil. Even farmers who cannot read understand these signs. The knowledge flows orally through generations. But more important than the symbols themselves is the belief that dreams are a form of communication between worlds. The gods do not speak in plain words. They speak in the language of visions, metaphors, and shadows.
To ignore a dream is to ignore a message. Thus, Egyptians speak of their dreams with seriousness and humility. They recount them slowly, recalling each detail. The angle of the moon, the color of a robe, the direction of a footstep. Each element matters. And in this gentle attention to dreaming, we see another side of the Egyptian mind, one that treats mystery not with fear, but with quiet curiosity. Not all dreams are left to chance. Some Egyptians seek dreams intentionally. In the soft hours after midnight, a handful of figures may be seen walking through the dark. Slow steps, careful breaths, guided by torchlight. These are patients, supplicants, and those searching for guidance. They travel to the temples of healing, places dedicated to gods like Sekhmet, Hathor, Isis, or most famously, Imhotep, the physician who became a god of medicine. The practice is called incubation, a ritual of sleeping within a sacred space so that a deity might send a dream containing a cure. The journey itself is peaceful. Feet move across cool sand. Torches sway with the wind. The night sky feels endless, a dark ocean sprinkled with eternal stars. When they reach the temple courtyard, priests greet them softly. No grand ritual,
no chanting, only quiet instructions.
A priest guides them into the inner chamber, a small, darkened room where mats are laid on the floor and the air carries a faint scent of incense and old stone. The walls absorb every sound. The ceiling is low and carved with symbols meant to protect the sleeper. The supplicant lies down, closes their eyes, and waits for the dreaming to begin. This ritual is considered sacred, but also deeply human, a recognition that healing sometimes comes not from medicine, but from insight delivered in the calm, drifting world of sleep.
The priests themselves rarely sleep during temple incubation rituals. Instead, they keep a quiet vigil. Some sit beside oil lamps, writing slowly on sheets of papyrus, recording visions, prayers, and the small offerings left by hopeful villagers. Others hum gentle hymns, barely louder than the flicker of the flame. At intervals, a priest may walk soundlessly through the pillars of the temple, checking on each sleeper, looking for signs, listening for murmurs, observing the way their chest rises and falls, as though reading a language beyond breath. To the priests, dreams are not random. They are a dialogue between the mortal body and the divine. Even the silence is meaningful. The temple at night becomes a living organism. The soft glow of lamps, its heartbeat. The sleeping supplicants, its breath. The priests, its watchful eyes. Time moves differently here. Minutes stretch like hours. Hours feel like moments. Night in a temple is thick and gentle.
Egyptian philosophy describes the soul as having multiple components. The Ka, the life force, the Ba, the roaming spirit, and the Ak, the transfigured form that survives death. During sleep, the Ba leaves the body, often depicted as a bird with a human face, and travels through the unseen realms. Some Egyptians believe the Ba visits ancestors, while others say it rises to the heavens or moves through shadowed corridors guarded by deities. But almost all agree on one thing. When you dream, it is because your Ba has seen something. Not imagined it, seen it. Thus, dreams are treated with respect. They are handled carefully, like objects made from fragile alabaster. And in the stillness of night, as the body sleeps on its woven mat, the Ba moves freely, not violently or dramatically, but like a drifting feather through a world we cannot see. The Egyptians find comfort in this. The night is not lonely. It is full of quiet company. Just before dawn, the desert begins to pale. A soft milk-blue light creeps along the horizon, and the darkness thins. Inside the temple, the sleepers stir. Eyes flutter open. Fingers stretch. The Ba has returned. Priests move quietly between them, offering warm water and dates. There is no urgency. The waking is intentionally slow, respectful, as if the soul needs time to settle back into the body. The priests ask gentle questions. What did you see? What colors were there? Which direction did the figure walk? No detail is too small. The dream is spoken aloud, carefully, so it can be interpreted. Sometimes the message is clear, a cure, a warning, a path forward. Sometimes it is not, and the suppliant is told to return and dream again. Outside, the first rays of Ra rise above the Nile, painting the world gold. Another night has passed, another chapter in the endless, calm rhythm of Egyptian life. The villagers return home,
The priests extinguish the lamps. The temple grows silent once more. And somewhere overhead, the sky lightens into day, while the dreams linger softly like footprints in sand.
Not all of ancient Egypt was shaped by kings or priests, or by the cycles of the Nile. Much of what we admire today, chiseled statues, painted tombs, delicate jewelry, was created by hands that moved slowly, steadily, and silently in the dim light of workshops. This chapter lingers with those hands. We spend a long, quiet day among the artisans, sculptors, painters, bead makers, woodworkers, and stone carvers whose gentle craft shaped a civilization's memory. Here the pace slows even more. Tools tap lightly. Brushes whisper across plaster. Dust rises like pale smoke in beams of warm sunlight. Nothing rushed ever came from an Egyptian workshop. Beauty grew gradually, like a seed warmed by patience. Let us step softly into that world. Morning arrives with a muted glow, not the blinding gold that floods temple walls, but a gentler light, filtered through linen curtains, drifting across stone floors, waking the artisans who live in small, close-knit communities. One such village sits quietly on a desert slope, its mud brick homes pressed close together, shaped by necessity and habit. These are homes of workers who craft for the pharaohs, yet their own lives remain modest. The village stirs slowly. A woman grinds barley for the morning meal, the rhythmic stone against stone sound echoing against the silent hills. A man steps outside, stretching his arms to greet the dawn air, still cool before the desert heat grows heavy. Children chase each other softly, still half asleep, their feet kicking up dust that hangs in the light like powder. And across the entire settlement, one subtle movement begins. Artisans open their workshop doors. It is time for a new day of making. Egyptian tools are simple, yet precise. Chisels, mallets, copper blades sharpened on sandstone, reeds trimmed to make brushes, pigments ground from minerals, deep red from ochre, green from malachite, blue from precious lapis. These materials sit in shallow bowls along the workshop walls. A sculptor picks up a chisel, touching its edge with the familiarity of someone who has used the same motion thousands of times. His hands bear the marks of his trade, small calluses, faint scars, traces of stone dust that never quite wash away. He sits before a block of limestone. The first tap is light, barely audible. The second, a bit firmer. The third, steady, a rhythm forming like an ancient heartbeat. He never hurries. To rush a sculpture is to ruin it. Each stroke is a conversation with the stone. In another corner, a painter prepares pigments. He grinds crystals with patient circular motions, mixing them with water or gum to create colors older than language. His palette is calm and earthy. Muted reds, dusty yellows, cool greens, warm browns. Even the act of mixing color is slow meditation. Outside, the village hums softly with life. Inside the workshops, time stretches, quiet, precise, unbroken. Just beyond the village, half sunk into a hillside, stands a long, low building where the tomb painters work. Inside, the air is cool, protected from the sun. The walls are covered with grids drawn in red ink, guidelines that help the artists maintain perfect proportions. Egyptians use these grids not as constraints, but as a gentle structure that keeps the sacred scenes harmonious. A team sits on low stools, each focused on a different part of the wall.
One outlines figures with a reed brush. Another fills garments with soft color. A third adds details to lotus blossoms, feathers, or water ripples. They work close to each other, but rarely speak. There is comfort in the shared silence.
The images are calm and rhythmic. Fields of grain, boats drifting on the Nile, offerings of bread and flowers. Even depictions of the afterlife are serene, full of gardens, music, and quiet wandering. Egyptian art avoids chaos. It prefers order, balance, and the gentle beauty of daily life. A painter pauses to dip his brush into blue pigment. He paints the sky above a sacred boat. The stroke is slow and steady, as though each line helps maintain the harmony of the world. This work, so soft and peaceful, will outlast all of them.
Outside, beneath a canopy made of woven reeds, two jewelry makers sit cross-legged on mats. Their tools are small and delicate. Bronze needles, fine thread, tiny stone beads polished until they shine like drops of water. They work with almost invisible movements. One threads carnelian beads, fiery orange, glowing like captured sunlight. The other shapes gold wire, bending it with gentle pressure to form loops and clasps. Egyptian jewelry is not merely decoration. Each stone has meaning: turquoise for joy, lapis for protection, carnelian for strength of heart. The artisans know these meanings by heart. Their hands treat each piece with silent respect. Sometimes they pause to hold a bead between their fingers, inspecting it as though listening for something. Only when satisfied do they add it to the design. The breeze rustles the canopy. Shadows shift quietly across their tools. Time moves like honey, slow, sweet, unhurried.
In another workshop, the scent of cedar and sycamore fills the air. Woodworkers shape simple objects: stools, jars, chests, and figurines used in religious rituals. The wood is soft beneath their hands. A craftsman uses a bow drill, its rope moving back and forth in a slow rhythm. Another smooths the surface of a wooden box with sandstone, the sound soft as cloth brushing against skin. The Egyptians believe wood has a soul, a memory of the tree it once was. So the craftsman moves gently, as though waking that memory, coaxing it into shape. A stool takes shape from a single block. A figurine emerges, slim, graceful, serene. And when each piece is finished, the artisan places it carefully aside, not piling them, but laying them out as though allowing them to rest. Even objects deserve rest in Egypt.
By midday, the sun climbs high, and the village grows very quiet. Work slows naturally. Artisans put down their tools and sit in the shade, sharing bread or pouring cool water from ceramic jars. They talk softly if they speak at all. A sculptor wipes dust from his arms. A painter closes his eyes for a short rest. A child brings his father a piece of fruit left from the morning meal. Nothing urgent happens here, nothing dramatic. This is a community built on patience, a kind of peaceful persistence in the face of the desert's endless expanse. Even the heat becomes a companion, a reminder to move slowly, to breathe carefully, to live deliberately. As the harshest heat passes, the workshops come alive again, but alive in the Egyptian sense, quiet, measured, thoughtful. A sculptor begins carving the curve of a face. His chisel moves with reverence, as though each tap is a breath. Limestone flakes fall in soft, powdery whispers. A painter outlines the petals of a lotus, one stroke, then another, each identical in calmness and rhythm. The jewelry maker threads the final bead of a necklace,
its colors soft and glowing in the afternoon light. Outside, the sky shifts toward a muted amber. Shadows lengthen. Birds fly low over the desert. Inside the workshops, creation continues with the same quiet devotion. As day ends, artisans begin putting away their tools. Nothing is ever truly finished in a single day. Egyptian beauty is built slowly, over weeks, over months, sometimes years. A sculptor covers his limestone block with linen to keep dust from settling into the carved lines. A painter closes the pigment bowls, careful not to spill a single grain of precious lapis. A jewelry maker folds her mat, placing her half-finished pieces in a clay jar. The sun sinks, the desert cools, the village exhales. Art remains where it has always thrived, in the steady hands of ordinary people who carve, paint, polish, and shape the memory of an entire civilization. In the quiet of night, the tools rest, the artisans rest, and the Egypt they build continues to endure in its soft, deliberate, timeless way. Tonight, we move quietly, ever so gently, to a place where time breathes a different kind of air. The western bank of the Nile has grown darker. Torches flicker like tired stars. The desert wind is soft, but it carries something ancient. A whisper of rituals, a murmur of prayers, and the faintest scent of incense that has clung to the sands for thousands of years. This is the necropolis, a city of the dead, where ancient Egyptians believed life continued in a form far more delicate, but no less real. Here we walk slowly, soft footsteps, steady breaths. Hands behind the back, gaze lowered in respect. Here, every grain of sand feels like memory, and every stone like a heartbeat that no longer beats, yet is somehow still alive. Let us continue the story. The necropolis begins not with tombs, but with silence. A broad horizon lies to the west, its colors melting into gold and violet. Priests often said this was the place where the sun itself grew tired, where Ra descended into the underworld to battle the great serpent Apophis before rising again at dawn. To live in ancient Egypt was to exist between two worlds, the world of light and the world of shadow. And tonight, we step into that second world, but gently, carefully, with the same measured breath as the priests who came before us. The workers who maintained the necropolis were simple people, artisans, stone cutters, plasterers, and men who woke before dawn to prepare pigments and mortar. They built tombs not for themselves, but for the wealthy, the noble, and the sacred dead. And yet, they treated the work as something deeply personal. Imagine the scene. A young craftsman wipes dust from his brow. He adjusts a chisel that belonged to his father, and perhaps his grandfather before him. He inhales the scent of gypsum and paint, rich blues from lapis, deep reds from ochre, soft greens from malachite. Before entering a tomb, he whispers a quiet greeting to the spirits who dwell within, not out of fear, but out of courtesy. Because in Egypt, the dead were never gone. They were present, watchful, listening. In the distance, you might sense a quiet rhythm, not music, not voices, but the gentle echo of sandstone being shaped. The tombs are arranged like a city. Wide avenues of sand, chambers cut into limestone cliffs, small shrines facing west where the sun begins its nightly journey. Some tombs are humble, simple rectangles carved into the desert floor. Others are elaborate,
descending deep into the earth like spiraling dreams. But despite the differences, they all share one belief: the dead must be remembered. The living had a duty to maintain the memory of those who came before. Offerings were placed: small jars of beer, bread loaves, dried dates, onions, and lotus petals. Even a humble pot of water could be a gift worthy of a king, if given with a sincere heart.
Imagine a mother bringing her small child to a family tomb. She kneels before the offering table. The child watches wide-eyed, curious but quiet. The mother lights a small flame, cups her hands around it, and murmurs, "May you never thirst. May your ka be nourished. We remember you." To them, this wasn't morbid. It was simply life, a part of existence just as natural as planting seeds or baking bread. Here in this quiet city of the departed, the boundary between living and dead dissolves into the soft hush of sand. Now we step inside one of the workshops near the edge of the necropolis. It is not loud. It is not chaotic. It is a place of steady concentration. Inside, artisans sit cross-legged on woven mats. Their tools rest neatly beside them: bronze chisels, wooden mallets, powdered pigments, small brushes cut from reeds, blocks of limestone. The air is thick with dust, but also with intention. A painter mixes color with water in a small dish, stirring slowly, deliberately, as if whispering to the pigment. He does not rush. No one here rushes. In Egypt, art was an act of devotion, not to mortal kings, but to the gods, to the universe, and to the very concept of order, Ma'at, the quiet balance that held the world together. When a craftsman painted scenes of daily life onto tomb walls, he was not merely decorating. He was giving the deceased a world to live in, eternal fields to farm, eternal banquets to enjoy, eternal music to soothe the soul. Imagine one painter leaning closer to his work. He paints a farmer harvesting barley, a woman grinding grain, children playing with sticks and pebbles. He adds a tiny detail: petals falling from a lotus onto a river's surface. These scenes were not idealized. They came from life itself, from memories of mornings along the Nile, from the laughter of friends, from the feel of warm earth under bare feet. The artisan breathes slowly, lightly. He paints with care, almost reverence, because he knows in Egypt, art is a bridge between worlds. Farther within the necropolis, the air grows cooler. A priest stands before a table of ritual instruments: linen bandages, natron salts, wooden jars, amulets carved with protective symbols. He wears a jackal-headed mask of Anubis. The mask is not frightening. It is solemn, sacred, a reminder that he serves the boundary between life and death. The priest's movements are slow and methodical. He prepares the purification rituals with the same steady care as a monk arranging candles. He speaks quietly, murmuring ancient words. May your heart be light. May your path be clear. Contrary to popular imagination, Egyptians did not see death as terrifying. It was simply a passage, a long, gentle walk into the western horizon. The priest smooths linen cloth, not hurriedly, but with calm hands. Each wrap is measured. Each gesture is a blessing. He places a small amulet shaped like a scarab over the heart, believing it will protect the spirit during judgment. He places another behind the neck, carved with the words, "Arise, like the sun. The chamber is dim, lit by only 2 oil lamps. Their flames sway slightly as the priest moves. And though the ritual is long, it feels peaceful, as if he is tucking someone in for an eternal sleep. We now step into a tomb, freshly prepared for its occupant. The air is cool. The walls are vibrant with scenes of harvests, feasts, musicians, and fields of reeds that sway forever in the afterlife. But the colors are soft, not bright, as though time itself has already breathed upon them, giving them a comfortable, aged warmth. Lotus motifs curve across ceilings. Stars are painted overhead, each one carefully placed. Egyptians believed the night sky was a vast, silent ocean where souls could sail forever. A small wooden statue of the deceased stands in a niche. His eyes are inlaid with obsidian, giving them a depth that seems almost alive. A low offering table rests near the entrance. On it are carved representations of bread, onions, beer jars, and figs. Not real, but so meticulously shaped that they serve the spirit just as well.
You run your fingers lightly over the stone. It is cool, smooth, quiet. You hear nothing but your own breathing. For Egyptians, the tomb was not a place of sorrow. It was a home, a sanctuary, a space prepared with thoughtfulness and care, so the spirit could rest peacefully. And in that silence, you feel something gentle, a soft presence, like a memory brushing past your shoulder. Egyptians believed the soul was not a single entity, but many different aspects. Tonight we focus on 2, the Ka and the Ba. The Ka is simple. It is the life force, the energy that gives breath, warmth, motion. The Ka required food and drink, even in death, which is why offerings were essential. A loaf of bread placed by a tomb door wasn't symbolic. It was nourishment for the Ka. Meanwhile, the Ba is something more personal. It is the personality, your laughter, your memories, the way you tilt your head when you think. The Ba could move, traveling between the world of the living and the dead. At night, the Ba might wander, visiting familiar places, floating over the home it once lived in, listening to the voices of children or the rustling of palm fronds in the courtyard. In the morning, it would return to the tomb, reuniting with the Ka, and together they formed the Ak, the luminous, eternal being who lived forever in the presence of the gods. To the Egyptians, death was peaceful continuity. The soul moved gently between realms, like the moon drifting across the Nile's reflection. As night settles fully over the necropolis, the desert cools. The wind grows softer, slower, almost sleepy. The stars stretch across the sky in delicate silver arcs. Workers return home. Priests extinguish their lamps. Even the sounds of distant animals fade into the stillness. But the necropolis does not feel lonely. It feels patient. It feels like a place gently holding memories. A place where thousands of lives continue in silence, in stories painted on walls, in names carved into stone, in offerings left by hands now long forgotten. Egyptians believed the dead listened. They believed the dead appreciated being remembered. They believed the dead watched the rising and setting of the sun just as the living did. And so, tonight, in this last chapter of our walk through the necropolis, we stand quietly at its center. We inhale, we exhale.
we feel the vastness of time settle around us like a soft cloak. Nothing dramatic, nothing frightening. Just peace. A gentle reminder that in ancient Egypt, life and death were simply two halves of the same eternal cycle. One illuminated by the sun, the other shaped by shadows. And in both realms, the world moved slowly, softly, dreamily, like a lullaby whispered by the desert itself.